call to order this hearing of the Senate Tax Committee. The first item on our agenda is adoption of the minutes. Are there any corrections to the minutes? Seeing none, the minutes stand approved as presented. The first bill we have today is Senate File 2684, Senator Kunesh. Welcome to the committee. Senator Kunesh, we have the A8 amendment. Senator Klein moves the A8 amendment. Going to ask Senate Counsel to go through it. This is not the first committee, and so we need it explained before we take a vote on it. Mr. Arneson.
Madam Chair, I can go through it, but perhaps you would prefer to have the K-12 staff describe their amendment?
Sure.
What your preference?
That would be fine as well. Please identify yourself for the record, and if you would go briefly through the A8 amendment, explaining where the changes are and what their purpose is.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members. My name is Betsy Jelseth. I'm the nonpartisan analyst on the Education Committee. So for the A8 amendment, lines 2 through 4 update the second-tier local optional levy equalizing factors starting in fiscal year 2025, and that ensures the bill does not increase total statewide levies above the estimated February 2023 forecast. Lines 5 through 7 update the operating capital equalizing factors starting in fiscal year 2025 so that the bill does not increase the statewide levies above the amount estimated under the February 2023 forecast. Line 8 corrects the operating capital levy effective for revenue date. Lines 9 through 13 clarify the one-time language in the referendum renewal by school board. Line 14 clarifies that the copy of the adopted resolution must be submitted to the commissioner and to the county auditor no later than September 1st in the calendar year in which the written resolution is adopted. Lines 15 through 19 update the general education aid appropriation amounts needed because of the updates in the second-tier local optional levy equalization factors and then the operating capital equalization factors. Lines 20 through 25 update the Compass and MTSS appropriation amounts to keep the bill within the target amounts. Line 26 clarifies that the Eastern Carver County School District lease levy for a Transportation Hubs Authority is included within its current lease levy and not in addition to its current lease levy authority. Line 27 removes the voluntary pre-kindergarten and school readiness plus levy adjustment section and neutralizes the voluntary pre-kindergarten levy using local optional revenue and operating capital revenue back within Article 1. This ensures levies are neutralized in the bill. And then lastly, line 28 makes a correction to how the Adults with Disabilities Program revenue is calculated.
Do members have any questions or comments about the A8 amendment? Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a brief question. I haven't had time to reference it in the bill yet, but just on the amendment here, and I'm sure Ms. Helseth can just explain it. It looks like on one point on the amendment, lines 14, 15, and 16 are where my questions are. So we're talking about the levy, and in line 15, it appears that you're removing $2 million from one particular area and increasing that in line 16 in another area. But perhaps that's not accurate. That's just what it looks like on the amendment here. And I haven't had time to reference the bill, so I'm just wondering if you can explain the movement of the $2 million.
Ms. Helseth?
Madam Chair, my name is Jenna Hofer. I am the fiscal analyst for the Education Committee. Senator Nelson, thank you for the question. So you are correct that on line 15 of the amendment, it does reduce the general education aid appropriation by approximately $2 million in fiscal year 2024, and then it would increase that appropriation on line 16 by approximately the same amount in fiscal year 2025. And this has to do with how the levy is equalized and then neutralized within the bill. And so under the bill originally, the voluntary pre-kindergarten program had a levy component that was paid in all state aid. And as a result, that aid was appropriated in fiscal year 24, 25, and later. But with the reversion to how the VPK levy program normally operates with that levy component. The levy cannot begin until fiscal year 2025. And so as a result, when you neutralize the levies within the bill, that neutralization won't start until fiscal year 2025. So as a result, you see that shift from one year to the other.
Thank you. Actually, that answers my question. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor of the A8, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. The motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. We're usually quicker on that. It's been a long week already. Senator Kunesh, welcome to the committee again, and if you would like to point out those items in your bill that speak to any kind of tax policy or levies. I understand that this bill represents a zero levy target. Is that correct?
It is correct, and if you wouldn't mind, I think I'll ask Ms. Joseph to go through that, if that's okay.
Okay, just the tax piece.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. Again, my name is Betsy Jelseth, the nonpartisan analyst on the committee. So I'll review just the tax provisions that are changed from current law. So Article 1, Section 9 on page 7 updates the second-tier local optional levy equalizing factors starting in fiscal year 2025. And again, that ensures that the bill does not increase total statewide levies above the amount estimated for under the February 2023 forecast. On page 9, Article 1, Section 12 updates the operating capital equalizing factors starting in 2025 so that the bill does not increase total statewide levies above the February 2023 forecast. On page 12, Article 1, Section 16 allows the school board to renew a referendum for one time without voter approval. Page 13, Article 1, Section 17 prohibits a school district from including in its unemployment insurance levy authority the unemployment insurance costs attributable to school hourly workers between terms. Moving on to page 99, Article 5, Sections 1, 2, 5, 6, and 7 are all related to allowing a student with a disability to be eligible for free public school services until the pupil's 22nd birthday. This increases levies due to the increase in pupil counts. Article 6, Section 1 on page 117 allows a joint powers district under Section 471.59 to have its member districts include in their levy authority a proportionate share of their long-term maintenance costs of the joint powers districts. On the same page, 117, Article 6, Section 2 allows a cooperative unit under Section 123A.24, Subdivision 2, or a joint powers district under Section 471.53 to have its member districts include in their levy authority the costs associated with leases of administrative and classroom space. Moving on to page 121, Article 6, Section 4 authorizes Independent School District 112 to levy for the cost of a pupil transportation hub, provided that the district can show a significant savings, and then as long as the district's lease levy does not exceed the current cap. On page 122, Article 6, Section 6 allows heating, ventilation, and air conditioning costs to be included in a district's long-term facility maintenance plan for a non-school facility that was converted and remodeled into a school facility if the building was purchased between January 1st, 2019 and June 30th, 2023. On page 131, Article 8, Section 3 makes permanent the 4,000 additional seats in the voluntary pre-kindergarten program and the School Readiness Plus program. And again, this increases levies due to the increase in pupil counts. On page...
Excuse me, that is the section that the amendment was speaking to. Is that correct?
I
In
think
part?
we take out I think it was Section
Participation
8.
units?
Oh, Sorry, what did you say?
You said Article 8, Section 3,
Yep.
and I'm just asking, is that, and I'm going to go back and ask you about some of the others. You went really too fast for me. That is referenced in the amendment that Senator Klein offered. Is that correct?
Yes, that amendment took out the Section 7, which was related to the levy adjustment for the voluntary pre-kindergarten program. So we still keep in the Section 3, which is just the extension of the seats. On page 139.
So, excuse me.
Oh,
If you would just, I am trying to follow along, and I can't do that if you're speaking that quickly.
Sorry.
So if you would slow down, and I'm not looking at the bill, I'm looking at the summary. So if you would indulge us, please.
Yep, sorry about that. Article 9, Section 2, updates the community education levy tax rates so that the community revenue increases under Section 1 of Article 9 are provided all in state aid. And then Article 9, Section 7, increases the adults with disabilities program revenue for fiscal year 2025 and later. And then this section creates a tax rate so that the additional revenue is provided all in state aid. And I think that covers the 12. Please let me know if you want me to go back or talk slower. I'm sorry about that.
Are there, I'll find them for myself later. Are there questions or comments for Senator Kunesh or Ms. Helseth about the sections of the bill that relate to taxes? Senator Nelson first and Senator Weber.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a brief comment and then a question.
Sure.
Members, and also I'll make sure that you have one, Madam Chair. But I just wanted to note that in my email today, I just received a document from the Rochester Area Legislative Caucus, sent to the Rochester Area Legislative Caucus, and it's from the Rochester School Board members, their legislative committee. And it was just some feedback on the bill, Madam Chair. So I want to make sure that you have this and committee members have it, so it's in the record. But I would just say, just briefly, that they're very concerned about the mandates. And even though there's significant funding in this bill before us, that the funding will not satisfy the costs of the mandates. And so they're concerned about how they're going to be able to continue their fine education of students with actually less money to get in the classroom. So I just wanted to mention that, and I'll make sure you get a copy as well, Madam Chair. But my question was on page 122. In lines 8 through 14, it was about the long-term facilities maintenance to include heating and ventilation if it was a non-school-owned building during a certain amount of time. And I just want to know, what building are you trying to capture with that? That's pretty specific
What is the,
language.
Senator Nelson, what's the page and line?
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Again?
It's page 122, lines 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. It's the long-term facilities maintenance piece regarding heating and ventilation costs.
It's section 6 of the bill.
Section 6, yes, ma'am.
Senator Kunesh or Ms. Helseth, either?
Sure, I'll answer first, and then Ms. Helseth will respond as well. So these are buildings that are not typical school buildings that are sitting vacant in the communities of Moorhead and I believe Fergus Falls, and they are converting them into buildings for educational purposes. And Ms. Helseth can respond to that as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Senator
Ms.
Nelson.
Helseth?
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Madam Chair and Senator Nelson. Yeah, and just on top of what Senator Kunesh said, this under current statute, districts can't use the long-term facility maintenance revenue for HVAC, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning purposes. So this just allows them to do that.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Weber.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to follow up on the unfunded mandates portion of this bill. Specifically, the one that I wish to deal with is the increased employer cost regarding covering seasonal hourly school workers with unemployment insurance. Now, your bill goes so far as to specifically prohibit school districts from being able to levy to cover this cost. And Madam Chair, my question is why, Senator Kunesh, would you do that?
Senator Kunesh.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Senator. We did not want to put the burden on the community, and this is a very robust bill. It's got the highest targets that we have ever had in our state, with 4% and 5%. And we feel that it is adequate to cover those expenses and not put the additional burden on the communities. You might call some of these things unfunded mandates, and you might look at it as that way, but we were very intentional and very clear about making sure that whatever we put into this bill, that there were going to be costs. There might be costs already on their books or some of the things that they'd like to do, but we're pretty confident that within this budget that we've put together, we have funded all of the requirements and all of the resources that we've put in front of them.
Senator Wilbur.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I'm afraid we're going to have to agree, Senator Kunesh, to disagree on this issue. And certainly, my school districts disagree. You know, what I am hearing, and many of the mandates are showing up in other bills. They're not part of the tax considerations, and I understand that,
okay.
Madam Chair. But we still, as members of the tax committee, have to be mindful of the total costs of this bill. And my school districts are telling me that if all the mandates are approved, their two options will be to either raise local levies substantially or to start cutting programs. The phrase has been used, it is the destruction of our school system this year based on the education bills. And so regardless, Senator Kunesh, how strongly you may feel in favor of some of these provisions, by taking away managerial rights of our school boards and administrators, by forcing these extra costs on them, you are creating a true hardship for education all across Minnesota. And I guess that's all I have to say for right now. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I'm sure we're going to hear more later.
You will, Madam Chair.
Senator Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Kunesh, there's a provision in Section 16 that allows a school board to renew a referendum without going back to the voters to vote on that referendum. Can you please explain that section and how that would work?
Senator Kunesh.
Yes, we made this option a one-time only. And so the districts could go ahead and renew these levies just one time and then go back to their community or to the school board to get to renew it once again. These are usually like 10-year levies that are going back for reapproval. And I think it's 132 out of 133 have been renewed over time. And so this was a request from the schools and the school districts so that they don't have to incur the cost and the hassle of going back and approving a levy that's already approved. They can't increase it. They have to just continue what's already there.
Senator Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Senator Kunesh, basically when voters approve a referendum, they're voting to increase their property taxes. So this would allow the property tax increase to stay in place without going back to the voters to vote on it. Is that correct?
That would be correct.
Senator
That's a
Kunesh.
one-time only. And again, they can't raise it. It just has to stay at the same amount. And that would allow for that continuation of support to their schools.
Madam Chair,
Kunesh.
Senator Kunesh.
Senator Miller. I'm
Thank you,
sorry.
Madam Chair, Senator Kunesh. So it's one time only, but it could be up to 10 years. Is that correct?
Correct?
Thank you.
Any other, Senator Putnam?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to offer a counter perspective to one offered by Senator Weber, which I in no way doubt the veracity of his experiences. But I think we need to acknowledge and remember that this is a big, complicated state. I know a superintendent pretty well, and I've had conversations with her about St. Cloud School District in particular, which, as you may know, is the least and most poorly funded school district in the entire state. If you do the math and you look at the cost of instruction versus the resources granted, St. Cloud is by far the most poorly funded school district in the state. And my wife is its superintendent. And in my conversations with her about the 10,000 kids for whom she is responsible, she's looking forward to some guidance, like the kind of guidance that Senator Kunesh's bill offers, and the resources that travel with it. I just wanted to offer that counter perspective, realizing that we're a big and complicated state with lots of different school districts.
Thank you, Senator Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A question for Senator Putnam. Is she also looking forward to the unfunded mandates that are coming her way?
Well, Senator Miller, I would say that she
Putnam,
wouldn't
you need
just.
to go through the
Sorry.
chair, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Senator Miller. She would not call them unfunded mandates. She'd call them work. I'll be honest. She'll call them work. But she wouldn't call them unfunded mandates because currently, as we're looking at the situation, a lot of the stuff that's in there is actually funded. And that's important. You might call them mandates, you might call them guidelines, but you can't, at this point, call them unfunded. But you know how it is. Like, clearly, she would want more resources. Everybody would. Everybody cares about the kids who are in their care. But we have a responsibility as government to put guidelines on how those resources are used. And I think that that's how she would appreciate some of these interventions in Kunesh's bill.
Senator Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I don't have the honor of representing the St. Cloud School District, but I do represent several other school districts, and the superintendents I'm hearing from are calling them unfunded mandates.
Thank you, Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also echo the comments of Senator Weber. And one item to note is I've heard from 4 of my school districts, unsolicited, the spreadsheets that have shown the cost of the mandates or the guardrails, or whatever you want to call them. The point is, our schools are required to do these things, and the funding, while significant and historic, Madam Chair, is not sufficient to pay for the costs. And so I will share with you all of the spreadsheets that I've received from the superintendents, and they're very concerned. And then the last thing I would question for you is regarding the one-time referendum extension. In the tax committee, when we extend like a local sales tax, for example, it has to come again before the tax committee. And that one of the things we look at is the projects. So my question is, it looks like this second extension without voter referendum, how do the voters, well, they're not going to get to vote, but are the projects included in that first referendum? Or could it be a whole new set of things that this referendum is going to fund because it's automatically, they don't have to go to the voters for the extension, but are the things it's going to fund different, I assume it would be, and have the vote, and quite frankly, then the voters have never had a chance to say, these are the type of things that we want to increase our property taxes for. So that's my concern, is where do the voters have any input on what the extension will be funding?
So Senator Kunesh, I think that the question is, when under this Section 16, when and Ms. Hell says perhaps as well, when a referendum would be renewed, it's just the time period that would be renewed. The conditions under which the voters approved it remain the same and may not be changed. Is that correct?
Ms. Hilsa.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, that is correct.
So Senator Nelson, I think that's the answer to your question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That does answer my question.
Any
May-
other?
Chair, may I
Just a
just
second.
respond?
Let me just see if there's any other question or comment. Senator Nelson.
So with this renewal of the referendum, again, this is what the schools are asking for, the districts, the superintendents are asking for. We're talking about unfunded mandates that they don't want, but this is something that they actually do want and have been asking for a long time. It's a one-time renewal, has to stay at the same rate, the same amount. Ms. Joseph just said it needs to stay within the same parameters of it, but it also has to be approved by the school board. And so if you're wondering where does the community voice comes in, those school board members are elected elected members. And if that school or that community doesn't feel like they are looking out for the best interest of the school, that's where they have the power to make those changes. But I'm also hoping that those school districts will have conversations with their communities, be very transparent, and ensure that the communities realize why it is so important. And then the one thing that we did add to this was that when it does go to a vote, there is a recorded voice vote so that the community knows, which of the members approved it and which were against it. And so these are all ways for the community to have that kind of understanding and transparency.
Senator Kunesh, is the vote that's taken require a supermajority?
I don't believe so.
Just a simple majority?
A simple majority.
Ms. Helson?
Madam Chair and members, I would just add that this is for operating referendums and not specific capital projects.
No, we know.
Okay.
Senator Jaskowski?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Kunesh, you mentioned that the superintendents were asking to be able to renew the levies without taxpayer approval. What do the taxpayers think of that?
Madam Chair.
Senator Kunesh?
I have not heard a negative remark from the taxpayers.
Senator Jaskowski?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, Senator Kunesh, I think as soon as they find out, and I don't know how they're going to find out about this, maybe it will be when this gets foisted upon them, when it passes the Senate and the House and gets signed into law by the governor. But I think they're just hearing about this now. Many of us here are just hearing about this now. And I think you might want to ask them what they think about taking away their ability to provide their citizen-directed input into this. We're taking away, I mean, for a party that talks about democracy, this is destroying a section of democracy, and it's also taking away the voice of the taxpayer. I think there will be quite a bit of dissension among the taxpayers about this.
Madam
Senator
Chair.
Putnam, I'm sorry, Senator Kunesh?
Well, maybe not everybody knows about this. All the community members in Minnesota understand this, but for the last 7 years that I've been in the legislature, sitting on education committees, every single year this comes up. So it's been well discussed. I would hope that those superintendents that have been coming forward, which is almost everyone, including the superintendent group, have discuss this and voice this with their communities. And again, those school board members are elected officials, and so they should be doing their due diligence as well and educating their communities. And I think that going forward, this is going to make it a lot easier for those school districts to operate in a more effective way.
Thank you. I'll just comment with regard to Section 16. I think it's even longer than 7 years ago. I was one of the first members of the legislature to propose the continuing operating levy for a single time without going back to the voters. was very controversial when it was introduced. And as you can tell, continues to be controversial, but I'm pleased that it's finally in the bill myself, and wish you success on it.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Putnam.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Kunesh, I'm sorry if this has been covered already, but I think it's an important point. I recall in an earlier version of this provision, like a couple years ago, that part of it said that the mandatory renewal, the automatic renewal, would be listed on the ballot, in the ballot question, so that it would say, if you vote yes for this, it will be automatically renewed in a year or two. Is that still a provision here, so it's perfectly clear to voters that that's what's going on?
Senator Kunesh,
I think it should be.
does the original question on the ballot
I do.
indicate that the school board may decide to renew it without going back to the voters?
Madam Chair, and Senator Putnam, it says,
She's voting right now.
so in this version of it, no, it does not specifically have that on the ballot. But it does, again, as I mentioned, Senator Lucero's amendment about having that recorded vote, and an adopted resolution, a written adopted resolution authorizing the renewal after holding a meeting, so they have to hold a meeting to inform the community, allow for public testimony, and hear about that proposed renewal.
Senator Kunesh, I don't know that anybody here at the table in the tax committee has an amendment that would address that issue, but I think you should look forward to seeing it some other place where the voters know the first time they vote on it that if they're voting yes, that there is the chance that it's going to be renewed one time in the future if the school board decides on it. Senator Klein.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the provision in the bill, which, when I was first elected to the school board in West St. Paul in 2013, was our top legislative priority. We ran a few operating referendums during the time that I was there, and I think the Minnesota School Board Association has told us that out of the last 9 years, there were 133 operating referendum renewals, 132 of them passed. One thing that you didn't highlight, but perhaps we could, and it won't show up in a revenue estimate, but this is a cost-saving measure for your bill. The resources of school districts that go into sort of informing the public about these renewals are significant. The staff time, et cetera, that's utilized in that is a significant cost. Doesn't show up on your spreadsheet, but it is a cost-saving measure, so I thank you for the provision in the bill. And as an elected official, this is representative democracy. People who are on school boards will vote aye or nay on these renewals, and then they will be subject to the will of the voters at the next election, who will have record of that vote. So I appreciate the measure.
Thank you.
Is there further discussion? Senator Weber.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Following up on your previous comment, I'd like to make an oral amendment. I would move that that with this provision being talked about, that the possibility of potential renewal without another vote be included in the wording of the original question to the voters.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Arneson.
I think typically to accomplish that would amend a section that's not in this bill. The ballot language, required ballot language for referendum questions is in 126C17 subdivision 9. We could prepare an amendment to accomplish what Senator Weber wishes for this committee, but it would take a few minutes, and it might be better to have it written because that section is not in this bill currently.
Okay.
Senator Weber.
I'm fine with taking a few minutes, allowing them to do that.
Madam
Okay.
Chair.
Senator Kunesh.
If I could make that suggestion, I would prefer not to do it right now on the spot, but if Senator Weber would like to prepare an amendment that we can look at and discuss for either amending it in finance, or if he'd like to bring it to the floor, I would be amenable to that.
Senator Weber, it's up to you.
I will be willing to do that, Madam Chair.
Thank you, it's very gracious. Thank you, Senator Kunesh, for your offer, and we look forward to seeing such an amendment come forward. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak to the tax provisions in the bill?
I'm on Zoom. Would it be possible if I testified?
Who is that?
Missed the deadline.
Whoever was speaking, we don't have any record of someone wishing to speak, and you missed the deadline.
My apologies. I'm on Zoom.
Sir, you still had to meet the deadline for requesting to testify, and we don't have any such testimony.
Asking his name, please.
But
That's okay. Thank
just
you.
1 second. Mr. Bergman wants to know your name. Maybe he does have your name at another point, on another list. If you could-
My name is Darwin Schaefer-Lane. My apologies. I didn't clarify that earlier. I am testifying on the Omnibus
Yes.
Transportation Bill.
Mr. Bergman found your name.
He wants to talk about the transportation.
But,
bill.
sir, we understand you want to talk on the transportation bill, not the K-12 bill. Is that correct?
Indeed. I just was curious if it was
Okay.
possible over Zoom to also testify on this if you were looking for further public comment. But if not, that's okay.
We'll be back to you when we're dealing with the transportation bill. Thank you very much. Anything else from members? Senator Klein? I need a motion.
Madam Chair, I move that Senate File 2684 as amended be recommended to pass and moved
Finance.
to the Committee on Finance.
All in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion prevails, and Senate File, whatever it is, 2684 as amended will be sent to Finance. Thank you very much, Senator Kunesh. We enjoyed the discussion. Okay. Senator Weber.
So the three small ones next. Okay, so the first one is undone.
Okay. Senator Weber with Senate File 1608.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senate File 1608 makes a change in the amount that our watershed districts may levy for, and that has been currently limited at $250,000 at a rate of 0.048%. That amount has been in effect for 22 years. And they use this money primarily for administrative expenses in order to pursue grants and other projects involving the watershed districts. Watershed districts are a unique creation. They oftentimes will go beyond county boundaries and include multiple counties. And what this particular bill does is that, as I've mentioned, it raises the amount from $250,000 to $500,000 as the maximum that they can charge. And I do have an amendment, Madam Chair.
Yes.
It's the A2 amendment.
Yeah,
That says-
Senator Weber moves the A2 amendment.
And the A2 amendment, Madam Chair, simply
Yes.
clarifies the effective date of the bill.
And this is an author's amendment. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion prevails, and the amendment is adopted. Senator Weber,
And thank you, Madam Chair. With that, I would turn the testifiers table over to Jan Voigt, Executive Director of Minnesota Watersheds.
Ms. Voigt, welcome to the committee. If you'd identify yourself for the record.
Madam Chair and members of the committee, my name is Jan Voigt. I'm the Executive Director of Minnesota Watersheds. I want to thank Senators Weber and Kupek for authoring this bill and you and the committee for this hearing. Please allow me to begin by providing some brief background information about watershed districts. Watershed districts were established by the Minnesota legislature in 1955. These special purpose local units of government were organized to protect and manage water resources based on hydrologic boundary rather than political boundaries. Because they are based on a hydrologic boundary, the watershed district could include all or a portion of cities, counties, or townships. By statute, watershed districts have the responsibility to conserve the natural resources of the state by land use planning, flood control, and other conservation practices using sound scientific principles for the protection of the public health and welfare and provident use of natural resources. Watershed districts are formed by citizen petition to the Board of Water and Soil Resources to address water resource issues such as water quality protection, erosion and sediment reduction, and flood control. There are 45 watershed districts in Minnesota, and 30 of them are affected by this legislation, which would allow local citizens to make grassroots decisions about where and how to invest funds for managing water resources. It should be noted that this legislation would give them the authority to raise their levy. It does not mean that they would immediately do that. I worked for a watershed district for 38 years, and when this happened 22 years ago, it took us 7 years before we got to the $250,000. The watershed law provides for board members that are appointed by county commissioners. Watershed district boards consist entirely of citizens who live within the district and represent the interests of the communities that they represent. This keeps the Watershed District Board focused on the protection and preservation of water resource issues at the local level. The appointed board does have taxing authority and is accountable not only to the county commissioners, but to the communities in which they live and work. Watershed districts have to put together a budget and publish it and hold a public hearing on an annual basis for their general operating levy. And this is a transparent process that has worked well for the last 68 years. Greater Minnesota watershed districts face the same demand for new programs such as One Watershed, One Plan, as well as increased water quality and quantity project activity, increasing costs of wages and expenses, and increased state and federal water quality regulations as those in the metro. Yet watershed districts in Greater Minnesota have had their general operating levy capped at $250,000 for the last 22 years. And the present value of that $250,000 is $420,000 today. As a former watershed administrator, I know the difficulties this levy cap causes. Greater Minnesota watershed districts are restricted in their ability to apply and compete for Clean Water Fund grants because their capacity to generate the local match is limited. However, this is not an issue for metro watersheds because their general operating levy is tied to the projects and programs identified in their watershed management plan that are approved by the state. Increasing the general operating levy has been our top priority for the past 5 years. We need your help and your support of Senate File 1608 to increase the general operating levy for Greater Minnesota watersheds so they can continue to meet local needs and state water quality goals. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Voigt. Are there questions or comments for the witness? Seeing none, I see that we have a Tara Gutner on Zoom. Welcome to the committee. If you identify yourself for the record.
Madam Chair and members of the committee, my name is Tara Getter, and I am the administrator of the Pelican River Watershed District. And if you wonder where that is, we're in Northwest Minnesota, Becker and Otter Tail counties. And a little tidbit here, our watershed district was formed by citizens in the mid-1960s for water quality. We're the first watershed district in the state of Minnesota to manage lakes. And as Jan was saying before me, the 250,000 cap is getting difficult. As administrator, trying to make those dollars stretch is getting more and more difficult. And to the point when I was here back in 1999, and that legislation was changed in 2001. And it took us 17 years to finally get to that $250,000 cap. We implemented that in 2017. But I'll tell you, it's getting more and more difficult for me to plan out a budget based on those dollars. The good news, though, is that we have a lot of grant funding and projects that are in the hopper. We have clean water funds, the Lessard SAM funds, the Bowser Clean Water Funds, One Watershed, One Plan implementation funds, federal EPA 319 funds, but they all require matches and staff time to manage these projects. Just to give you an example, we just finished up our One Watershed, One Plan for the Otter Tail River. It's a large basin. We have 11 planning regions. Our watershed district is one planning region alone, and there are $20 million worth of projects that are slated, ready to implement in the next 10 years. And so part of what we say was, Jen was saying, some watershed districts were formed for flood control, we're water quality. Give you an example of just quick rundown. I have a lake TMDL, Campbell Creek Sediment TMDL, Campbell Capital Improvement Projects. I've got a $3 million wetland restoration project going on. We also do data collection. We monitor 18 lakes and 10 stream segments. We also have permitting programs where we look at stormwater management. We also do AIS treatments on 5 lakes here for curly leaf pondweed and flowering rush. We also are working with the DNR and fish passage projects where we're removing a dam, will be happening this summer in one of our systems. We do numerous education and outreach programs. In fact, a staff person just got done in 5 fourth grade classrooms giving discussions and so forth. And so for us, I just want to I'll keep it short right now, but it's getting tougher and tougher with 3 full-time staff people to do that work on $250,000. We have 7 board members and paying for 7 board members and travel expenses and keeping the lights on in the office here. It's getting more and more difficult. So I really appreciate you just even considering this change. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Getter. Are there questions or comments for the witness? Seeing none, Senator Weber, do you would like to make a final comment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just appreciate the opportunity to present this bill and ask for your consideration.
Thank you very much, Senator Weber. Senate File 1608 is laid over for the omnibus bill as amended. Next, we have 3 bills from Senator Dibble. We'll start with Senator Dibble. Well, I'll wait for you to get there. Do you want to go in the order that they're on the agenda, or do you prefer a different order?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think, yeah, the order on the agenda looks great.
Okay, then we'll
Thanks.
take up Senate File 671. Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to present Senate File 671, and I'll invite my testifiers to the table to join me. Very quickly, Madam Chair, the part of Senate File 671 that brings us to the Tax Committee is Section 2, which would create a tax exemption for this particular kind of car rental entity. Just very, very quickly, by way of very quick summary overview, car sharing is very different from daily car rental. Car share vehicles are available on a around-the-clock basis every day of the week. They can be booked within just a few minutes. They're accessible near where people live and work, and they're rented on a very short-term basis to do things like run errands or, get to various things that people need to get to as an extension of other modes of transportation that they would typically use. Maybe it would help them get closer to their bus or train connection, or it's just simply a supplement to their typical daily meanderings and mobility needs. It's a particularly powerful model for low-income folks. Excuse me. It really helps folks who need that kind of flexible mobility for particular kinds of needs. The purpose of this proposal, Madam Chair, is to bring the cost down just slightly from what it costs today. Already, these nonprofit car sharing entities, of which there is only one, Our Car, are exempt from the 5% car rental fee, but members may be aware we also have, on top of the 5% car rental fee, a 9.2% car rental fee. I'm not sure of the history of all that, but that kind of came into existence one year magically. And so, I think the idea was to fill the budget at one time and make people from out of town pay it. Of course, that is not the case, particularly in this instance. In addition to these two taxes the one tax exempt from the 5%, but car rental services are also subject to regular sales tax as well as local option sales tax, et cetera. So they would continue to pay those. So at present, those who would rent these cars on a short-term basis to extend their mobility options pay something in the neighborhood of 17%. So that's the goal of this section. The other section speaks to some other goals of the bill, which are to create a grant program, which is being carried in the transportation bill, so that Our Car can extend its reach to communities beyond where it serves at present. So that's the overview of the bill, Madam Chair, and I have
Thank you,
Paul Schroeder and Russ Stark who
Sure,
can testify
thank you.
as well.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Dibble. Mr. Schroeder, could you identify yourself for the committee?
Yes, good morning, Madam Chair, Senator Rest, committee members. My name is Paul Schroeder, and I'm the CEO of Our Car, Minnesota's original nonprofit shared mobility service. Our Car has been connecting people to their communities with convenient, equitable, and sustainable multimodal transportation options since 2005. In February of last year, Our Car launched EV Car Share in partnership with the cities of St. Paul and Minneapolis, Xcel Energy, the American Lung Association, and East Metro Strong. EV Car Share offers a fleet of shared electric vehicles that can be used to take one-way trips in the metro area. People use EV Car Share to connect to all kinds of needs, medical appointments, shopping, work, etc. They can also use EV to get to the bus or the train. We know our services are meeting a need. Last year, Our Car members took almost 80,000 trips, spanning nearly 1.6 million miles. This reduced an estimated 3,257 metric tons of greenhouse gas and saved Twin Cities residents over $11 million in transportation costs for personally owned vehicles. 36% of our usage came from Black, Indigenous people of color, and 30% from very low-income households earning less than 50% of area median income. So as Senator Dibble said, something that makes our service less affordable than it could be is that car share users are currently obliged to pay the 9.2% rental car tax on all trips. Nonprofit car share was specifically exempted from the 5% rental car fee that was passed in 2005, the same year that Our Car was founded. SF 671 simply takes the same exemption tests found in the rental car fee and applies them to the rental car tax. To qualify for the exemption, the car share operator must be local and nonprofit, must own, lease, or operate its own fleet, must cover gas and insurance through a membership model, and must park its vehicles in self-service locations where they are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. SF 671 also updates the language of the exemption to account for the existence of one-way services like EV Car Share that park vehicles in the public right-of-way. This wasn't around in 2005. So what's being proposed isn't really something new. It's the extension of an already existing exemption for nonprofit car share that's been on the books since 2005. This exemption is warranted because the use case of car sharing is quite different from that of the traditional daily rental car model. EV car share trips can be as short as 5 minutes, and most are less than an hour. EV car share serves as a multimodal connector, enabling people to trip chain, making more rapid connections to transit and supplementing biking and walking. The benefits that car sharing provides to the community in terms of emissions reductions and transportation cost savings, especially for low-income people, warrants this exemption. We all know that transportation costs are rising. Last year, they grew at double the rate of housing costs. The 9.2% rental car tax on car share trips is an added burden for households that can't afford to own a car and are struggling to make ends meet. The successful launch of EV car share points to the potential of electric shared mobility options to both reduce emissions and create significant return on investment to the community in the form of transportation cost savings, especially for those communities that can least afford it. This represents a real win-win for the community. We're already working with the City of St. Paul to expand EV car share deeper into the east side, and we're partnering with Xcel Energy to make shared electric vehicles available at low-income multifamily projects throughout the region. We just opened our latest electric car share hubs at low-income multifamily complexes in Little Canada, Richfield, and Bloomington. And we've had inquiries from throughout the state, from Duluth, from Northfield, from Faribault, from Bemidji, about operating similar models there. Passing SF 671 will support our efforts to support access to clean, affordable transportation options in Minnesota. I appreciate the committee's consideration. Happy to take any questions at the pleasure of the chair.
Thank you very much. Are there questions for this testifier? If not, Mr. Stark.
Thank you and good morning, Madam Chair, committee members. Russ Stark, I'm the Chief Resilience Officer for the City of St. Paul. As Mr. Schroeder has described, we've been a deep partner in the delivery of this electric car share service here in St. Paul that is really designed to serve our disadvantaged communities, both in St. Paul and Minneapolis, at a time when the cost of vehicle ownership has skyrocketed for our families, and when new cars literally are becoming sort of a luxury item, and the used car market is available for others. This service has really taken off because car ownership is down and people need mobility options, especially folks with lower incomes. That's why we as a city have partnered to try to deliver this service, which traditionally was more of kind of a niche service that was available in some communities and not others. But really feel like this is an important service that complements transit and gives people options who have very few options for how to move around town. And we'd love to see this opportunity spread to other parts of the state. This bill would help make that happen. So thank you for your consideration today, and we look forward to any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Stark. Mr. Schroeder, welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Thank you to Senator Dibble for this legislation. My name is Will Schroer. I'm before you today as the chair of the Minnesota Shared Mobility Collaborative. The Shared Mobility Collaborative is a group of transportation leaders, public agencies, private companies, city officials, and nonprofit organizations from around the state working together to increase shared mobility's options across the state. We're hosted in part and supported in part by the Center for Transportation Studies at the University of Minnesota. And as you heard from the previous testimony, the current car rental tax imposes substantial burdens on operators and users of car share. I'd like to offer one additional perspective from the world of research at the university. The U of M's Institute for Urban and Regional Infrastructure Finance in 2020 surveyed transportation options around the state and noted substantial transportation gaps, especially in greater Minnesota, and recommended shared mobility as one way to meet the need for affordable transportation in greater Minnesota. Mr. Stark has mentioned the fact that this has been observed as a little bit of a niche service in the cities, and I wanted to particularly underline the U of M's observation that this is a particular need in non-metro areas in greater Minnesota. I'd like to quote very briefly from the report. While shared mobility services like car share have been most often associated with urban areas, addressing transportation gaps in rural areas is an especially important need. There is an especially important need for shared mobility services to address transportation gaps that prevent residents from accessing work and essential services. And so just to, with the additional perspective provided from that research, I'd like to underline the previous points that removing the 9.2% burden on operating these services would help them spread to places that really, really need them. Thank you.
Comments or questions for this witness? Senator Nelson or Senator Dibble, either.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, my comments, I think are more for the bill author, Senator Dibble. And to understand from the testifiers, I think I understand the genesis. The idea is that by removing this 9% tax or fee, whichever it's called, will result in the ability to expand into new areas, or it will accelerate that ability to expand into new areas. And also, I'd assume, Senator Dibble, that the idea is that it would help hold down the costs for the consumers. Is that correct?
Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Nelson, yes, in part. Certainly, the second part is true, holding down costs for consumers, so making it more attractive and viable in other places where they would like to locate. In addition, there's another aspect, another element of the bill, which would provide some grants to support that expansion for various purposes they would have to purchase vehicles, promote the service, engage with the community. They designed the services in conjunction and in conversation with the communities in which they would make the services available. So there's a collaborative effort that goes on that would be supported. That element is part of, or is being carried in a bill that we'll be hearing shortly. I had one more thought, but I'll think of it in a minute.
Senator Nelson.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. So I just wanted to kind of get that on the record, that the idea that we reduce the fees or the taxes either allows the business expansion, but more to this piece right here, it particularly helps hold down the cost for consumers. And my hope is that we understand that that doesn't just apply to this particular issue. It applies to other tax proposals that we'll see or that we've seen in the governor's budget. We need to know just that those taxes are borne by the consumers. And that's kind of my point. And I think maybe your bill here illustrates that. And I think I understand the value of this and appreciate, we have our car in one of my communities, and I know it's been extremely helpful. Thank you.
So, Madam Chair, if I could
Yes,
respond.
Senator Dibble.
I bet we'll be talking about that very subject in a couple of bills. But I will point out that the taxes on rental cars are quite high if you add them all up. We've got the 5%, the 9.2, and then all of the regular sales tax and local option sales taxes. So it can run in excess of, in some instances, 25% of the cost, the base cost of the actual rental. So it gets pretty high. It's all about proportion and context and outcome. So.
Anything further? Then thank you very much, Senator Dibble.
Madam Chair, may I make one final point?
Absolutely.
If you look at the revenue note, the implication is for the Highway User Tax Distribution Fund. And I will just point out so that everyone is aware, the contents of this proposal are also in a bill, which we will discuss in a couple of bills. So.
Okay, anything further? Thank you very much, Senator Dibble. And Senate File 671 will be laid over for inclusion in the omnibus bill.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair, members.
Senator Dibble, we now have Senate File 3233.
All right. So, well, Madam Chair, I left my notes at my place, but I think I can describe the bill from memory.
I think a bunch
And
of
we
us
have
could
Mr.
describe
Shetland
this
here.
bill.
Let me just use this as my little cheat sheet here. So the short version, Madam Chair, is that as members may be aware, the Metropolitan Council has the power to levy property taxes. It's true. Even though there is no elected member of the Metropolitan Council, they have the power to levy property taxes, which they do. Part of what they use those property taxes is to support
bonding, which they use for the purpose of supporting the transit system. So they do have to come to the legislature every 2 years.
Yep.
To receive the authorization to issue bonds supported by that property tax that they levy to support some of the capital needs of our regular route bus service. So the regional transit bonds are used for purchasing and replacing buses and improving other facilities of a capital nature like transit shelters and things like that. I think we're going to see an amendment in a few minutes that would make sure that one aspect of Metro Transit service is not eligible for these bonds, which is fine. We've added that amendment in the past. That's not the purpose for which these bonds are used. And we have Mr. Shetnan here who can share some more information about this proposal.
Welcome to the committee, Mr. Shetnan. If you would identify yourself for the record.
Great. Good morning, Madam Chair and members. My name is Judd Shetnan. I'm the Government Affairs Director at the Metropolitan Council. I'd like to thank Senator Dibble for carrying Senate File 3233 for us. As you mentioned, this is a regular bill that we bring to the legislature seeking additional authority for our regional transit bonding needs. And I'll just add a little bit more detail that we primarily use these funds to replace our fleet, and that is fleet for the regional transit system. That includes Metro Transit, the Metro Mobility System, the suburban transit providers, and our regional dial ride buses. And we use these funds as the 20% local match to 80% of the federal funds that we received to replace the fleet. And we've been coming to the legislature since 1989 in order to receive this authority, and I would appreciate your support as well. So I'm happy to take any questions, but again, this is for small capital fleet replacement. It is not for the construction of the Southwest Light Rail line or the Botno Blue Line extension. It is primarily for fleet.
And Madam Chair.
Questions or comments for Mr. Shetnan or Senator Dibble? Senator Driscollowski?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have that A1 amendment that Senator Dibble referred to whenever you're ready, Madam Chair, unless you'd like to.
Is it in writing?
Yes.
Thank you. Senator Dibble, do you have this amendment?
I don't.
Would you give it to Senator Dibble first?
While they're passing the memo out, Madam Chair, if I could.
Senator Driscollowski, you can proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, members, we have actually, and I appreciate the discussion with Mr. Shetnan yesterday. We have had, this is exactly the same language that we put in each of the last two times the legislature gave this authorization to the Met Council. It's identical, and asking to add that onto this authorization as well. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Dibble, your reaction to Senator Driscollowski A1 amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would encourage that we accept the A1 amendment. It's consistent with practice. Whether or not the amendment were to go on, it would not be used for these purposes. It doesn't hurt to state it.
Mr. Shetnan?
Madam Chair and members, I did have a conversation with Senator Driscollowski about this yesterday. This is consistent with how we have approached these bonds in the last few years, and so the Met Council has no concerns with it.
Are there questions or comments for Senator Driscollowski's amendment? Senator Driscollowski, do you have anything further to add? All those in favor of the A1 amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. The amendment, the motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. Any further comment? Senator Dibble.
Madam Chair, I again would just call the committee's attention to the revenue note, just to let everyone know there is a general fund implication, and that, of course, has to do with interaction of the levy with property tax refunds and also with income tax for deductibility purposes. So there is a general fund implication from this proposal.
Okay. Seeing no further discussion, Senator Dibble, Senate File 3233 as amended will be laid over for inclusion in the omnibus bill. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Shetman.
Thank you.
The next bill we have is Senate File 3157, also a bill from Senator Dibble. Senator Dibble, this is your omnibus bill from Transportation. There is the 850 amendment. I understand Senator Putnam is going to offer it on your behalf. Senator Putnam.
Madam Chair, I'd like to move the A50 amendment, please.
The A50 amendment is before us. Since this is not the committee of origin, we will need it explained. Senator Dibble, if you want to do it or you want Senate Council to do it, it's your choice.
Madam Chair, I can give a very brief explanation, and if it is the committee's or your desire for more detailed, Ms. Boyd can help us.
Senator Dibble, I appreciate both.
All right.
First from you and then from Ms. Boyd for the detailed. So Senator Dibble, if you want to start.
Very good. Madam Chair, the crux of the amendment can be found on, starting on line 3.25 through 3.29. And that deletes a number of sections that would encompass the delivery fee that had been originally proposed in the bill. So the delivery fee would be simply deleted from this bill. And then on line 3.30, the proposed 3/4 cent sales tax in the metropolitan area would be brought down to a 1/2 cent sales tax. The other is more technical in nature, but slightly more substantive, and that has to do with there's a proposed tax credit, which is picked up and paid for in the bill, so it doesn't have implications for a future tax bill. But there's just some technical aspects. That's on line 4.12. There's a tax credit for purchase of e-bikes. And then the balance of the bill is simply reworking all of the various resources then that result from the reduction. The totality of the bill is reduced by about 1/3. Ms. Boyd.
Ms. Boyd, now if you'd identify yourself for the record and direct us through the other parts of the amendment. And is there a summary? And Ms. Boyd, I wonder if you would, as you go through the other ones, if you would tell us where, you don't have to refer to the bill necessarily, but what section of the bill is being amended so that I can mark it on my summary. That would be very helpful. Thank you. Welcome to the committee. Please identify yourself.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Krista Boyd, Fiscal Analyst for the Senate Transportation Committee. As Senator Dibble did a fine job on the walkthrough, and I'll just add more detail as I can. Starting on line 1.2 through to, 2.1, these are necessary appropriation changes to account for reduced revenues as a result of other parts of the amendment. And I'll just point those out quickly. These are all trunk highway fund appropriation reductions. So on line 1.3, this is a reduction to operations and maintenance in the state road construction section of the Department of Transportation. I'm sorry, Madam Chair, you wanted me to point out sections of the bill?
Those are found in Article 1?
I'm sorry, yes, those are in Article 1 in Section 2 under Department of Transportation. And I don't have the exact subdivision in front of me, but it's under the state road construction.
But that's where
Most
they're
of these
found
are
in Article
under state
1.
road
Thank
construction.
you, that's good enough.
So this is operations and maintenance reduction for state road construction, and then accordingly, the appropriations by fund section is amended. And then on line 1.10, this is a reduction to planning and research relative to the underlying bill. This is again under State Road Construction in the Department of Transportation. So that's again Article 1, Section 2. Line 1.12 is a reduction to program delivery under State Road Construction at MnDOT. And that's relative to the reduced revenues in the bill. Then on line 1.18, there's a reduction to the State Road Construction appropriation itself relative to the reduced revenues. And then the base is also, the base for that appropriation is also changed on 120 to 122 because of reduced revenues.
Why was I charged at all?
Then on line 1.23, there's a reduction to the appropriation for corridors of commerce.
I don't know if I should be charged at all for that.
And on line 1.25 is a change to the highway debt service appropriation. And in fact, this is not really related to the reduction in revenues. This is an update we've received from MMB on debt service in our bill relative to the last committee stop. There's no change in the bill that would necessitate a debt service change other than some updated estimates. And then on lines 129 and 2.1 are reduction, appropriation reductions for the state aid pieces, county state aid and municipal state aid. This is under local roads, under the MnDOT section 2 in Article 1, and that would be the end of the appropriation reductions. Then starting on line 2.3, this is moving around some existing bonding money that is in the bill. It's just moving 50 million of the trunk highway bonds that are in the bill from the state road construction program to the corridors of commerce program. And that is in part to make up for some revenue that was reduced from corridors of commerce ongoing appropriation due to the reduced revenues in the bill. Accordingly, on line 3.15, that's a change to the bond sale expenses relative to moving those bonding authorizations around, but the total number does not change on line 3.15. And then as Senator Dibble pointed out, starting on 3.25 through 3.29, these are the sections in the bill relating to the retail delivery fee. So those are simply all deleted from the bill. And those are in Article 3. And then starting on 3.30, these are changes related to the metro sales tax in the bill. Line 3.3, this is also in Article 3. And this is, I believe I have a section number for you if you'd like it, Madam Chair. The metro sales tax is in Article 3, Section 17, 18, and 21. So on 3.30, the rate, the sales tax rate for the metro sales tax has changed from 0.75% to 0.5%. And then there are some other technical changes made to that section. Accordingly, on the 4.1 through 4.3, there's a change to how the proceeds are deposited relative to this new percentage. They are roughly the same dollar amounts as in the underlying bill. Just a little refinement there. And then there's some conforming technical pieces on lines 4.4 and 4.5. And then, again, some more technical aspects, 4.7 through 4.10 for the metro sales tax changes. And then starting on line 4.11 are changes to the e-bike tax credit. These are technical changes necessary because the standalone bill was an ongoing permanent tax credit, and in the omnibus, it is limited to 2 years. Some of that language was not updated correctly when it was put in the omnibus, so this is just to make clear this is only a 2-year tax credit. And Madam Chair, that's the amendment.
Thank you. Questions on the amendment? Senator Dibble, was there any particular reason why you were making these changes from your committee to the tax committee in the appropriations amount? Or was it just kind of rejiggering and balancing from one account to another without any particular, overall metaphysical kind of goals?
Madam Chair, thank you for the question. The latter is more true than the former.
Okay.
Other than to say, in quarters of commerce, there's a strong feeling in the Transportation Committee and among, a variety and array of stakeholders
state quarters of commerce and state road construction, those relative amounts we wanted to keep relatively the same as was proposed. And because of the reduction in resources, quarters of commerce came down. Quarters of commerce is an opportunity, of course. There's always so much pressure, and we're going to have what we call show and tell day on Monday in the Transportation Committee, where we're going to hear everyone's individual, some call them earmarks, some call them community requests, but there's always just a lot of focus on specific roads in specific communities, and quarters of commerce is that opportunity to create a way to fund some of those projects that would otherwise just simply wait on the various investment plan lists. There's the CHIP and the STIP, and those are all like 10-year and 20-year plans. And so quarters of commerce is an opportunity for communities to organize around those high priority ideas. And so funding that at the rate that it went out of committee felt important.
Thank you for that explanation, Senator Dibble. Senator Nelson?
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Dibble, I was so excited to see the amendment regarding removing the delivery tax specifically, because we knew that would impact consumers, as we talked about earlier. But I'm just trying to understand the quarters of commerce piece here. So it looks to me like, and maybe you or your staff are we reducing the metro tax to a lower percentage, but we're taking it out of the quarters of commerce, which are the rural parts of the state? And so what is the effect of the amendment on the quarters of commerce funding? How much is it being reduced, and by how much?
Senator Dibble.
If your question is about the metropolitan area sales tax proposal, that has really no implication for corridors of commerce. There's no interaction between the metro area sales tax proposal and quarters of commerce. We're actually increasing the funding that we bring to corridors of commerce because we have more revenue as a function of this overall proposal. There are some conversations about that are being led by Senator Jasinski in conjunction with Senator Tokerson about how we allocate corridors of commerce, metro vis-a-vis greater Minnesota. And there's been a lot of conversation about how you define metro exactly, how far out does the metro extend. There's been corridors of commerce awards that have been designated as greater Minnesota that most people in greater Minnesota would think is actually the metro area. So we're trying to sort through that conversation. I don't know if that quite gets to your question. Ms. Boyd, do you want to take a crack at it?
Ms. Boyd. Madam Chair and Senator Nelson, I believe you're asking about why specifically the quarters of commerce appropriations were changed in the amendment?
Correct.
The retail delivery fee that was removed for the bill made a large part of its dedication was to the trunk highway fund. And with those new revenues, many pieces, as you saw in the amendment, were funded and later had to be reduced when the retail delivery fee was removed and that revenue was no longer available. In the Transportation Committee, there was an amendment to increase funding relative to base for corridors of commerce. And with the removal of those revenues, that level of funding was no longer able to be sustained. But there is an increase in fiscal year 25 relative to base remaining for corridors of commerce in the bill. Base is $25 million from truck highway per year, and this would increase it to $30 million. And then in addition, there is, I believe, $350 million of trunk highway bonding made available for corridors of commerce in the bill.
Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just to follow up, you're getting closer to my question here, and that is, so the amendment, because there were revenue reductions, I just want to know, what is the lost revenue to corridors of commerce because of the revenue reductions in the metro sales tax, in the metro tax and the delivery fee? What is the reduction to the corridors of commerce that we're going to see in these first 2 years, I believe you said? And how many, you might not know this, but how far down, how much more, what projects will not be able to be funded because of this less revenue because of this amendment?
Madam Chair and Senator Nelson, relative to base, there is no reduction to quarters of
Boyd.
commerce. There is a reduction to quarters of commerce relative to how the bill came into committee.
That's what I'm looking for.
Right, so, I'm sorry. So the appropriation, I don't have the old spreadsheet in front of me. Sorry, Madam Chair. Quarters of commerce coming into committee was $25 million, this is the ongoing appropriation, $25 million in fiscal year '24 and $35 million in fiscal year '25. And then the tails were $60 million in '26 and $125 million in fiscal year '27 and thereafter. Because of the reduced revenues and the reduction in the amendment, quarters of commerce will now receive $25 million as in base in '24, $30 million in fiscal year '25, and then $30 million in every year thereafter.
Senator Nelson?
So, Madam Chair, this is a significant reduction in quarters of commerce from how the Transportation Committee, the bipartisan bill, came out of the Transportation Committee. And my concern is that this significant reduction in the quarters of commerce is going to obviously not allow a number of projects in the rural parts of our state. And, we'd have to look at the math on this, but it looks like the reduction in the delivery fee, those reduced, or the deduction in the metro transit tax is being taken out. Those reductions are being then recouped by reducing the rural parts of the state, the rural quarters of commerce. So I'm just concerned to see the quarters of commerce funding reduced, and it looks like it's reduced significantly. And I'm concerned about how that's going to impact the non-metro parts of our state particularly.
Madam Chair.
Senator Dibble.
Senator Nelson, the opposite is actually true. In fact, well, first of all, Quarters of Commerce is not a rural program. It's a program that's shared by the entirety of the state, including the metro area. And in fact, we're probably working on language that's going to bring more of Quarters of Commerce resources to rural Minnesota, which I think is very generous on the part of a metro chair. And secondly, the cuts as a result of the cut that you're very happy about are spread out across the entirety of the bill in all areas. So much so, in fact, that some of the sales tax that we would propose for the metro area, we wouldn't use just for transit, but we'd use to offset a lot of the pressure that metro area roads experience. That sales tax in the metro levied by, metro folks for themselves, not shared by rural Minnesota. We were simply trying to offset a lot of the pressure we feel because the resources aren't actually shared equitably in terms of where the resources are raised and in terms of where the real pressure on our roadways are. And in fact, we bring more resources to keep Quarters of Commerce whole in the bonding program to offset the cut that was a consequence of the reduction to the overall by a factor of a third to the bill. So we actually do the opposite of what your concern is. And so I hope you can see that and see that we're being very responsive and very balanced in this proposal.
Senator Dibble, are the amounts for the state road construction and the bond sale expenses, are they affected by your proposed reduction in the metro sales tax? Or just the Quarters of Commerce?
Well, first of all, the metro sales tax is not related to this discussion. This all has to do with the elimination of the delivery fee.
Except that, Senator Dibble, I thought you said to Senator Nelson that the reduction in your proposal of the metro sales tax does have an effect on the Quarters of Commerce.
No, the point I was making there was that.
I'm not understanding your response.
The point, I'm sorry, Madam Chair, just to restate. The sales tax in the metro area, part of that is being used for roads going into the CASA fund, the County State Aid Highway Fund, for roads in the metropolitan area. And the point I was making was that in the totality of the bill, the metro area actually has greater needs than we raise through the traditional sources of funding through the traditional highway user tax distribution fund sources. We just simply don't get enough out of CASA or even municipal state aid, which is a different conversation, to keep up with the amount of pressure that we have on county roads. But there's no implication directly. I was just making a point.
I see. Thank you. Senator Jaskowski, on the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator Dibble. Senator Dibble, do any of the reductions in the amendment get applied to the agency's operations?
Senator Dibble.
Madam Chair, I believe I can answer that.
Ms. Boyd.
None of the new revenue that was from the taxes that are now removed from the bill, the retail delivery fee, were appropriated for agency services. So there would be no reduction relative to removing that revenue.
Senator Jaskowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you. So it appears we're reducing the dollars that are going to actually building the roads, but we're not reducing the agency's increase at all in the amendment. And while road funding has been the target of this, which, you know, I'm glad the tax is reduced in the amendment. We hold the, in the language in the amendment, we hold the agencies harmless. So it seems we know where the priorities are here. It's make sure the agency has as much of his money as it needs, but the road projects in Minnesota are the first place that it's cut. I'd like to see the agency actually get a reduction too, maybe proportionally with these decreases in these road construction areas. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other comments? Senator Klein?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Senator Dibble, thank you for the bill. I have a question about the metro area sales tax, and I think, Senator Dibble, you've forgotten more about statewide transportation funding than I will ever know, so please be patient with the question. But you decreased the amount from 3/4 cent down to 1/2 cent. When that change was made, did you change the 1/6% of the sales tax revenues that go to highways, or does that remain stable?
Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Senator Klein, for the question, and I have so many cheat sheets here that I've gotten them all mixed up. Ms. Boyd has it in her head. Short answer is no, but she can be more specific.
Ms. Boyd.
Madam Chair, thank you, and Senator Klein. Yeah, when it was 0.75%, it was an easy shift between, the shift was 5/6 of the revenue would go to transit and active transportation, and 1/6 would go to metro county roads. Shifting to 0.5%, the percentages were changed in the language, but we tried to keep the dollar amounts relatively stable according to the revenue estimate.
Senator Klein.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Senator Dibble. So I just want to point out a historic inequity in that distribution of the funds and encourage you to try to address it if possible as this bill goes forward. So at 1/2 cent, my counties are telling me that the metro sales tax will raise about $383 million annually starting in fiscal year 26, and 31% of that is generated in the collar counties, or $119 million is generated in the collar counties. When you distribute it with 1/6 of it going to the highways, the collar counties get about $9 million back, or 8% of those revenues. So they're paying in 30% and they're getting back 8%. So it's a historical problem. We may not fix it entirely this year, but I encourage you to keep giving it a look. Thank you, Senator Dibble.
Senator Dibble.
Well, thank you. I'll point out that there are other places in which we bring some dollars to the counties for roads, for the pressure on their roads, and also all the counties would benefit, of course, from the effort that we make for transit as well. I mean,
the core purpose of the proposal for sales tax in the metro is to support the pressure on our transit system and the need in our transit system. So this is part of the effort. It's shared among other areas of funding as well.
Okay, would you put them back in here? It says on. Further discussion or questions on the amendment? Thank you for describing it in such detail in this committee, and I'm waiting. Senator Nelson.
I forgot one question.
Go right ahead.
I think you didn't address, I guess, it's the license tab, registration, increased revenue. Can you address?
Senator Nelson, that's in the bill. This is only on the amendment. So we have Senator Putnam's amendment before us. Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. The motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. We now have Senate File 3157 before us. We are probably going to run over, but I do want Ms. Boyd or you, Senator Dibble, to reference throughout the bill other implications in the jurisdiction of the tax committee, if you will.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll try to be quick because I know there's a number of folks who would like to also speak to their perspective on the proposal. So just very quickly, Madam Chair and members, I'll be very quick in setting context. Of course, we know that we have an extremely thorough, fond of saying we have, by some measures, the fourth, other measures, the fifth largest roadway system in the country, which of course was created by those who went before us, who made major investments of their time and their treasure to build a very, very robust, really economic network. And I think it has a lot to do with the reasons why Minnesota has been as economically successful, especially relative to peer states in the upper Midwest and across the country. And it's something that we should be very, very proud of. And of course, that roadway system is going on 50 to 70 years, and it's in relatively poor shape, evidenced, of course, by the unique winter that we've had with the freeze-thaw cycle and the number of potholes that have appeared all over the place. It's in really, really tough shape. And we've had some large transportation bills in the recent past, but they've been just kind of one-off bills, if you will, large infusions of one-time dollars, lots and lots of bonding, which is by its nature one-time and also puts a lot of stress and pressure on our trunk highway fund because now we're at the upper limit of our ability to bond much more in the trunk highway fund. All of the revenues that are the traditional revenue sources for transportation have been in decline, which is a very different conversation around the other part of the budget that we love to talk about, which has been very robust and in surplus. The big three, highway user tax, gas tax, license tab fees, motor vehicle sales tax, have been in decline. Motor vehicle sales tax, of course, has a large implication for transit in the metropolitan area as well as greater Minnesota transit. And relative to inflation, relative to fuel efficiency, the workhorse of our trunk highway fund, of our highway user tax distribution fund, the gas tax, has been in dramatic decline, and we really haven't added anything appreciably to revenues for transportation. You know, we did do a fairly substantial bill in 2007, but even that was at about a third of the then identified need. And before that, it was about 20 years. So we're looking at 30-some years of lack of needed investment. This proposal, in terms of the identified need, as articulated by the Department of Transportation and all the other stakeholders and the engineers and the like, the original proposal as brought into the committee before the amendment only got us approaching about halfway point on the need in terms of our roadway system. But it did do some pretty important and exciting things, one of which was creating an ongoing sustained source of funding for our local roads outside of the county state aid and municipal state aid system, which I'm pretty excited about and pretty proud of, because 80% or more of our roadway miles are owned and operated by local jurisdictions, supported almost entirely by the property tax. There's some smaller county taxes, village tax and sales tax, but that's a small part of what supports our local roadway system. That's a lot of pressure on our property tax system, and our property tax system can't even keep up with what we have. And that's where we see a lot of the potholes, of course. In the metropolitan area, transit is so important, so vital to the success of communities, of individual lives, of prosperity, and we have been really shortchanging transit dramatically, with zero targets in terms of the general fund for transit in the metro area for a number of years now. So transit has been left entirely dependent on fares, on some surplus revenue that they have, and federal revenue that's come in, which they've been very fortunate. But those reserves that they've been relying on are getting down to zero fairly quickly. The federal funds, of course, we know are going to, are time limited, and those were a function of the pandemic. And motor vehicle sales tax is the other major source, and that's, of course, very volatile under the best of circumstances and in decline. And so our just regular route bus system will have to be dismantled by a factor of 3/4 if we don't do something about that. And then our ability to respond to the million or so people that are going to move into Minnesota over the coming 15+ years is just simply going to be impossible. Transit is also the thing that, of course, gets people up and out of poverty, and it's also the thing that young professionals are looking for in a metropolitan area, and they're choosing other places to live in large numbers because we're not making those kinds of investments. We have the opportunity to improve lives and also benefit our environment. Transportation is the sector in which the trajectory is in the wrong direction in terms of contributions to climate change. So those are the aspirations and the context of the bill. Going to the bill specifically itself in terms of what's proposed to be done. Like I said, we eliminated the delivery fee. We reduced the sales tax in the metro area, which would support transit needs on an ongoing basis. But we do look to some of the traditional sources for some what I would say, medium to modest increases. Like I said, they only get part of the way towards the need. But they include the vehicle registration tax, also known as the tab fee, in which, and we'll have Ms. Boyd describe in more detail if there's interest. We raise the amount of the tax relative to the price of a car, and then slow down the depreciation schedule, which takes place over a course of 10 years. That on that 10th year, we actually end up lower than what people would be paying today. That's, of course, prospective. It doesn't apply to cars that people currently own. There's always been a lot of interest in phasing in the auto parts sales tax, and we do have a set flat amount that we put into the highway user tax distribution fund at present. We changed that to a percentage, so that's not a new tax per se, that's general fund, just kind of moving that, so we use part of the target for. And then if people are interested in the amounts that we raise from the tab fee, it's about $240 million in this biennium and $540 in the next. Auto parts phase in, that raises about.
Senator Dibble, are you referring to the spreadsheet now?
I'm referring to.
Or your notes?
Yeah. Yeah. I have just kind of a revenue now similar to what I showed you yesterday.
Okay.
If you would like that distributed,
Yeah.
would that be helpful?
I think that would be
All right.
helpful. We're going to take our time with
All
the
right.
bill. I
Great.
do want, since there are tax increases in the bill, as well as changes in how those dollars that are raised are going to be used, I think it's important for all of us to understand it before this bill goes any further.
Great.
If we can get that. Thank you very much. But you can continue.
All right.
You can catch up as we get it distributed.
So the auto parts phase-in would raise about $42 million in this biennium.
in about.
Senator Dibble, do you know when we started that? I was trying to remember when we initially moved the sales tax on auto parts, any part of it, into a dedicated fund from the general fund. When did that begin? Was that in the 2007 bill?
2017, Madam Chair.
2017, okay. Thank you, and this sheet is very helpful. I appreciate it.
Great, thanks. Moving, and you can see how that gets distributed. That's part of how we start funding on a permanent basis through sustained source, small cities and larger cities. So those roads that are outside of the CASA and the MSA system. And then the motor vehicle sales tax, so that's the 6.5% sales tax that we pay at the point at which we purchase a car. That was never swept into the legacy. So now we, of course, know that, sales tax for other goods and some services is 6.875.
Any transfer to the legacy fund is irrelevant because it's not going there now.
Correct. But I'm just saying we're making it equal with that amount of sales tax, but we keep that 0.375% for transportation purposes. That, of course, is constitutionally dedicated for the purposes that you see. And that raises about a little over 104 million in this biennium and 110.8 in the next. And then, so some of the, we come in below on the 10th year on the depreciation schedule for tab fees, but then we raise it a little bit with the next item, which is $7.50 on tab fees, which supports, again, small cities and larger cities, as well as townships on a sustained, ongoing basis in the amounts that you can see broken out there. These are kind of flat amounts that exist ongoing, but totaling about 109.2 million in this biennium and 114 in the next. And then, of course, the metro sales tax that we've discussed, coming down from 3/4 cent to a 1/2 cent in the metro area to support metro transit, as well as some non-motorized transportation purposes, bike and pedestrian needs, just a small part of the part that you see under the metro transit line, as well as county roads. And you can see that's about 615.5 million in this biennium and 782.4 in the next. And then the supports, these revenue supports, some trunk highway fund bonding, which is proposed in the bill. And I'll have Ms. Boyd describe those amounts, which we've discussed a little bit here. And that's, of course, broken out between regular straight road construction bonding as well as corridors of commerce bonding. And then I'll turn to Ms. Boyd to see if I've missed anything, or if you'd like to give a more fulsome description of the bill.
I'm just going to ask if members, to start with, have questions about the sheet that was just handed out. Just make sure that people understand it. And, I look immediately to the actual equal amounts from the auto parts phase-in is shown as a carve-out from the general fund. I mean, I support it, but it's that first line with the negative numbers relates to the phase-in of the auto parts up in the top half of the bill. So just wanted to point that out, where that's coming from.
And Madam Chair, I left off a detail on the auto parts phase-in. So there, in the language of the bill, subsequent to the 26-27 biennium, there's then proposed a 10-year full phase-in.
And so that percentage starts where, before it gets to 100? Where is it in 26-27?
So after 26 and 27, so starting in 28-29, there's a 10-year process by which the entirety of the auto parts sales tax would be phased in for transportation purposes.
But where is it at 26-27? How far has it gotten, is what I'm asking. Senator Dibble or Ms. Boyd?
Madam Chair and committee, the phase-in percentages are listed in the bill in Article 3, Section 16. And in fiscal year '24, it's 50% to the general fund, fiscal year '25, 48, fiscal year '26, 46, fiscal year '27, 44, and then it accelerates a bit after the tails period. Do you want me to list all the?
Well, I just wanted to know where is it at the end of FY '26, '27? Is it at 60%, and then the next 10 years it gets the next 40%? Or what are those percentages where the phase-in starts in the dark target?
Madam Chair, at the end of fiscal year '27, in fiscal year '27, the general fund will receive 44% of auto part sales tax.
44%.
Yes.
That's the,
then
that
we'll-
answers the question that I was not particularly clear in asking, but thank you very much. Questions for the, about the spreadsheet relative to the revenues? Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Dibble, thank you so much for working on getting these auto part sales taxes dedicated to our roads and bridges. That's something that's been important for so many years, and I just really appreciate the fact that you are continuing that and you're taking it forward. I think that is just a real plus, and this is a good time to do that. Specifically. So I appreciate that greatly. I do have one question for you. One of those auto part sales tax dedication bills that we've had in the past included a piece for townships or town roads. And I'm just wondering if, I don't see it on the sheet here, and I'm just wondering if that is included somewhere. Just if you maybe comment on the if there's any dedication to the town roads, to our townships.
Senator Dibble.
So, Madam Chair, not specifically, called out in how this is formatted, but of course, townships do receive a portion of the Highway User Tax Distribution Fund, which receives the majority share of the auto parts phase-in. And so townships would definitely receive a boost from this proposal through the traditional source.
Senator Weber.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just 2 points. I believe, I originally saw numbers before you made the reductions, eliminated the delivery tax and the reduction of the the metro sales tax, that they're through the next 4 years, the bill actually raised fees and taxes by almost just under $4 billion. If I did my envelope math correctly on the new spreadsheet that was handed out, Madam Chair, I believe that total is at about approximately $2.6 billion. Is that a correct analysis?
Madam Chair.
Yeah, Senator Dibble, but also Senator Weber, if you look at the bottom of this sheet, you will see that I think that your math is pretty accurate. Okay. Senator Dibble, it's right there.
Thank you.
I just, Madam Chair, I'd just like to make sure the public's aware of totals.
Oh, I see, yes, okay, we can say, in 24-25, the total revenues that are new are $1,070,295, and in 26-27, it's $1,553,497. Add those together, and you get $2.6 billion, right? Give or take. Senator Dibble, any further comment on that?
Senator Weber is accurate. There's, of course, a context for that number.
I understand.
It
And so
doesn't even
does
approach
he.
the need in just for our state roads themselves, much less everything else that's being supported.
Thank you, Senator Dibble. Senator Jaskowski.
Senator
Oh,
Rest.
I'm sorry, you're not
Yeah,
finished.
thank you, Madam Chair. Just
Senator
one other thing. In an analysis that I had seen regarding the sales tax changes, it referred to, obviously, county roads, large city roads, small city roads. I understand those, but it also referred to something going to other city roads. What might that have been? I don't know what other city roads are.
Senator Dibble or Ms. Boyd, is that the side streets in St. Paul? What is that?
Yes, there's no,
Senator Dibble.
there's no local option sales tax for St. Paul, I promise. I'm not sure what that is, Madam Chair. I'll ask Ms. Boyd if she can help. You know what, I did want to spend a minute just in high overview describing what we use the one-time general fund target for, I think.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if you would just announce what that is, too. I know it was $1 billion in one-time money.
Right.
24, 25, and then was it 130 or what? What was it, the ongoing in 26, 27?
130, correct.
130, okay?
Yeah. So about
we
1
have all-
billion
we
in
have all
one-time.
those-
I mean, I know
all
it's
those
not.
numbers in front of
Yeah.
us.
It's not necessarily in the jurisdiction of this committee, but it informs.
I know, but it's just good to have the overall
Right,
budget for
right.
it.
So about $670 million, broken out in various ways, supports IIJA, the IIJA funds that would be coming to Minnesota with the match dollars that would be necessary to qualify for those dollars. Some of those are coming on a formula basis, some of those are coming in the form of competitive and discretionary grants. The bulk of it is coming on a formula basis. And then there's an additional $100 million that would support the Blue Line extension, as well as the train that would go up to Duluth, known as NLX. About $90 million would support the local road improvement program, as well as the local bridge replacement program. About $35 million would support our active transportation and safe routes to schools programs. And then the rest is, things like we're replacing the utility aircraft for the Department of Transportation, a helicopter for the State Patrol. We're actually going to be supporting, actually not through general fund, but through Trunk Highway Fund, purchase of an airplane to replace two very, very old airplanes that the State Patrol uses. And then, to Senator Oskowski's point, some of this is also supporting some of the operating pressure, the inflationary pressures at the state agencies and other smallish governor's recommendations as well as member initiatives.
Okay, is that the conclusion of your general remarks?
Yes, Madam Chair, I will continue to
Senator-
stand for questions, or we have a testifier.
Yeah, I'm going to take, because he's already raised his hand, Senator Driscowski first, and then we're going to go to testifiers, and before they begin, I have some general comments. Senator Driscowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Senator Dibble. I, too, share the support for continuing to move the auto parts general fund money into transportation. So appreciate that being part of this. But at the same time, I'm dumbfounded. We have a $19 billion overcollection of the people's money scheduled between now and the end of the biennium. And Senator Dibble, your party can't prioritize roads and bridges in that $19 billion of overcollection, and they have to raise taxes, you have to raise taxes in your bill to adequately take care of roads and bridges by $2.6 billion. Senator Dibble, what happened? What is everything a priority, or what was, can you remind us what your targets were of the existing, what will be a net 17.5 or 17.6 billion dollars? What were your targets there before you were pushed to increase taxes this full $2.6 billion?
Senator Roskowski, I'm going to ask him to repeat it, but he did say what it was. It was $1 billion in one-time money and $130 million in ongoing. But if you want to explain that further, Senator Dibble, and where you chose to dispose of that, I think that's an appropriate question, and we welcome your response.
Thank you. And we do, thank you, Senator Skowski, and I understand your point and respect it very much. You know, I respond by saying that, you know, most of transportation occurs outside of the general fund. We have done the auto part sales tax, and we've done, on occasion, you know, some one-off general fund, either appropriations or general obligation bonding to support local roads, but never on a sustained ongoing way. So it's been very volatile, very inconsistent over the years. We have made attempts to move general fund on a more sustained basis in years past, only to simply turn around in the subsequent year and pull it back. As a matter of fact, in the auto part sales tax, even though I'm supportive of migrating it over fully to transportation purposes, I bet you at some point we pull those dollars out of transportation because there's going to be a deficit year and there's going to be a lot of pressure on things that the state and the legislature prioritizes as more urgent and you know, things like, you know, K-12, E-12 education funding, or you know, long-term health care for seniors and the like. But that being said, even our ability to move to 100% auto parts dedication within these two biennia for which we established budgets was not supported by the target that I was given. So that's why we said, well, okay, we'll go to post 28 and start this 10-year phase-in of the auto parts sales tax. But your point is well taken, but the simple fact is we haven't invested and supported our roadway system in any meaningful way for 30 years. And transportation, it's important to remember, has a return. You know, it's not simply, you know, money that we, you know, expend that disappears. When we spend money on transportation, every credible economic study model shows us that we receive back $3 for every dollar that we spend. In transit, the return is even higher. It's a $5 return to every dollar that we spend. That benefit comes in a whole variety of ways, not the least of which is a more successful economy. We also know on the flip side, if we don't invest, our economy and individuals' lives don't thrive. If you think of, you know, which states do really well, well, Minnesota's always done really well because of its great roadway system. If we don't keep up with the roadway system, goods don't get to market as efficiently, people don't get to jobs, services don't get to market. Roadways just become more and more and more expensive to fix. We have more wear and tear on our cars, more accidents. In terms of transit, people just simply have unsuccessful lives. They just simply can't get to where they need to go, and we lose the young professional population out of the metropolitan area. So, you know, I know we're going to continue to have this discussion. Why are we raising money for transportation in an era of surplus? Transportation exists mostly outside of the general fund discussion. To the extent that it is within the general fund discussion, I didn't have the target to support it. But we do need to invest in the prosperity of our state, and we haven't done so for something like 30 years. So, long answer to a short question.
Senator Druskowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator Dibble. You know, I feel for you. You're chair of the committee that something that should certainly be a priority for state government, and with the $19 billion over collection, $1 billion out of that is going to be used for transportation according to the targets. So that's less than 5% of the huge over collection of people's money is dedicated to transportation. I'm still trying to wrap my arms around the huge spending spree that Democrats are going on here in a wide variety of areas. And obviously, when everything is a priority in spending, nothing is a priority. And when nothing's a priority, you end up in the situation that those of you that are working the transportation group are in. And you're raising taxes on Minnesotans when we have a huge overcollection, another $2.6 billion. I hope the people of Minnesota are watching. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Driscowski. Any other questions from the members? We will now proceed, Senator Dibble, to the testifiers. And I'm going to ask those who had signed up to testify, if you were testifying on the bill as it came to the committee, and your concerns or your points have been dealt with, please do not come forward and say, we're so glad something was taken out or something was put in, particularly for the things that were taken out. We don't need to hear that. What we want to hear is the bill that is now before us, and the that delivery fee is not before us. So please, no comments on that, or on the reduction of the sales tax. If you have comments about the taxes and the revenues that are in here generally, that is certainly appropriate, but please talk about the bill that is in front of us and not a bill that is not in front of us. Our first testifier is Mr. Graves from the chamber. Welcome to the committee. If you would identify yourself, and at this time I would also ask for Jill Sims and Aurora Vautrin to also join Mr. Graves at the table so we can move swiftly to your testimony. Mr. Graves.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members. My name is Bentley Graves from the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce. Madam Chair, we're unique in the transportation advocacy space. Because of the importance of transportation to commerce in our state, we advocate for meaningful, sustained investment in our transportation system. But unlike most other transportation stakeholders, the day-to-day concerns of our rank-and-file employer members requires that we advocate for policies and solutions that balance the need for increased investment with the state's competitiveness as related to the tax and business climate. Because of that, we're very appreciative of the portion of the bill that brings more of the auto parts sales tax revenues into transportation. This is something that we've been advocating for a long time, and greatly appreciate the fact that the bill puts us on the path to get 100% of those dollars into transportation over time. We also appreciate the changes made in the 850 amendment, but even with that amendment, Madam Chair, we would point out, as was noted earlier, over the next 4 years alone, this bill would still increase tax and fees by more than $2 billion. Included among them, as was noted earlier, a $700 million increase in tab fees, $200 million in motor vehicle sales tax increase, and $1.4 billion in the metro area sales tax increase. Our members don't have the luxury of looking at these transportation-related tax and fee increases in a vacuum. These increases come at a time when Minnesota already imposes a much higher tax burden than many other states, with Minnesota ranking 45th when it comes to our business tax climate among the worst in the country. Additionally, these increases would be in addition to other tax increases moving through the legislature this session, including a new annual $1.5 billion payroll tax. We agree that there is significant need for additional investment in the transportation infrastructure of this state. We're committed to continue working with Chair Dibble, with this committee, and the legislature to find ways to secure additional investment for the transportation system in ways that are balanced against the challenging tax and regulatory climate in which Minnesota employers already operate. Thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you, Mr. Graves. I had called forward Ms. Sims and Aurora Vautrin. Are they not here? What about Margaret Donahue and Eric Bernstein? Welcome to the committee. If you would identify yourself for the record.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Aurora Vautrin, and I am the Legislative Director for the Minnesota 100% campaign. I want to start by thanking Chair Dibble for putting together this robust transportation omnibus bill with a mix of revenue options that work together as a whole asking that everyone pitch in for a system that we all use every day. I want to express our strong support for the 0.75% metro area sales tax.
That's no longer in the bill. Please speak to only the stuff within the bill.
I want to express our strong support for the metro area sales tax. We know that $1 billion per year is the minimum we need to fix what we have and to meet our state's existing transportation goals. The system we need, the one Minnesotans deserve, with readily available, cleaner transit, safe streets, and maintained roads built by people who make a living wage, will cost at least $1.5 billion per year. We don't get to either of those numbers without new, dedicated, and at-scale revenue, like the metro area sales tax for transit. Without raising revenue, our transportation system will continue to deteriorate, and it will only get harder and more expensive to fix. Yes, our state has a surplus, and yes, that surplus should help fund improvements in our transportation system, but our transportation needs are ongoing and structural, which means one-time money will not solve the challenge we face. One-time money will not fix the years of underfunding of our transit, roads, and bridges. We need a comprehensive revenue package that invests in our statewide transportation system, where we all pitch in to pay for the transportation system we all use, and a metro area sales tax for transit is a key part of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Vautrin. Ms. Donahue?
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, my name is Margaret Donahoe. I'm the Executive Director of the Minnesota Transportation Alliance. The Transportation Alliance includes local governments, the transportation industry, transit systems, and other transportation advocates. On behalf of the member organizations of the Transportation Alliance, we would like to thank Senator Dibble for including revenue increases in the Omnibus Transportation Funding Bill. As he mentioned, the Minnesota legislature has voted to increase the gas tax and license tab fees exactly once in the last 30 years. These user fees, along with the motor vehicle sales tax, are constitutionally dedicated because Minnesota voters recognize the need for ongoing dedicated revenue for the transportation system. But the lack of action to allow these revenue sources to keep up is clear. The current level of funding does not allow for adequate maintenance and improvement of the transportation system needed to keep up with growing demands. While the state is projecting a significant surplus in the general fund, transportation fees are declining compared to previous forecasts, and transportation always struggles to compete for general fund dollars. For the FY 22 to 23 biennium, transportation received 0.9% of the state's general fund dollars. We recognize the importance of the one-time general fund dollars in this bill, but again, the shortfall is ongoing and long-term. And even the need to match federal funds will not end when the IIJA expires. Congress will pass another multi-year Surface Transportation Authorization Act with matching requirements. So the revenue increases included in Senate File 3157 are critical for reducing the ongoing shortfall, for allowing Minnesota to access increased federal funds, and to improve safety and mobility on the transportation system. We support the increases in the registration fee, the motor vehicle sales tax, the metro area sales tax with dollars shared between transit and county highways, and urge you to support this legislation.
Thank you, Ms. Donahue. Mr. Bernstein?
Thank you, Chair Rest. Chair Rest and members of the committee, my name is Eric Bernstein, and I am Director of We Make Minnesota, which is a coalition of labor and community groups united in support of a sufficient and equitable budget. Thank you for having me here today to share our support for the tax and revenue components of SF 3157. Our members use public roads and transit to get to work, where they educate our students, care for the sick, and maintain our shared infrastructure. We appreciate the committee's consideration of new funding sources in the face of a surplus that grants the false appearance of an adequately funded budget. Despite growth in the general fund, dedicated sources of transit and transportation funding have stagnated or shrunk relative to price levels and the size of the economy since the 1990s. For example, compared to state personal income, gas tax revenues have declined by nearly 40% since compared to our 1990s average, while major general fund revenue sources like the individual income tax have roughly kept pace with the growth of the economy. As a group, the three major sources of transportation funding have declined by about a third relative to state personal income.
The decline of funding relative to the size of the economy is important because the primary ingredient in a strong transit system is labor. Funding must keep pace with price levels and wage expectations of the workers we hire to build and maintain our core infrastructure. These taxes will help ensure that we can do that moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bernstein. Next, Mr. Thorson, Mr. Leto, and Ms. Nicholson. Mr. Thorson.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is John Thorson. I'm Legislative Director for LiUNA, Minnesota, North Dakota. We're Minnesota's infrastructure union representing more than 14,000 skilled construction laborers who build and maintain the roads, highways, bridges, and transit and critical utilities that allow our communities to thrive. I'm here today to speak in favor of the new long-term and dedicated revenue sources in Senate File 3157, which are necessary to fix, catch up, and keep up our roads, bridges, and transit throughout the state. Minnesota's transportation infrastructure needs are great, and this proposal can accelerate repairs to the over 600 deficient bridges and nearly 5,000 miles of our highway that's rated in poor condition. The state of our transportation infrastructure reflected in the American Society of Civil Engineers 2022 Infrastructure Report Card, which graded our roads D+, bridges a C, and transit a C-. Closing this gap will make Minnesotans safer, will boost our economy, and create family-supporting construction careers. This proposal will launch and maintain thousands of high-quality, family-sustaining, prevailing wage jobs for tradesmen and women all throughout the state. Very excited about the career and economic inclusion opportunities this will bring to Minnesota's construction industry. And through registered apprenticeship programs that support critical efforts that increase the participation of women, people of color, veterans, and others not participating in the economy to their full potential. Madam Chair, I want to thank Senator Dibble for bringing forward Senate File 3157. And it'll provide investments we can count on, make life better for millions of Minnesotans, and boost our economy in every corner of the state. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thorson. Mr. Leto.
Good morning. My name is Brad Letta. I'm the Secretary Treasurer of the Minnesota AFL-CIO, the collective voice of Minnesota's unions. Thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the Senate Tax Committees for the opportunity to testify. On Tuesday of this week, the Minnesota AFL-CIO Executive Board took a position on transportation funding. The resolution adopted stated in part, quote, the Minnesota AFL-CIO support and prioritize the passage of long-term and dedicated transportation funding package in the 2023 legislative session, and furthermore, tell the general public and state leaders to fix our roads, bridges, and transit, vote for new long-term and dedicated transportation funding. Why did our board act at this time? The last time lawmakers passed new long-term dedicated funding for transportation was in large part response to the I-35 bridge collapse 16 years ago. Minnesota has a transportation funding gap, as you've heard, of $30 billion over the next 20 years. Respectfully, the time to act is now. Now, some will say that in the time of the big budget surplus, now is not the time to raise revenue. But as we all know, one-time funding from this surplus does not fix roads, bridges, and transit over time. Others will say the federal infrastructure bill was the answer. Yes, this helps, but it does not fill a $30 billion gap. When thousands of miles of roads are in poor condition and there are more than 600 bridges that are structurally deficient and transit is underfunded, we need to act. Better roads, bridges, and transit allow drivers, transit riders, and businesses to connect all of us together. Senate File 3157 has several good features increasing existing revenue streams and long-term revenue. Just in part, this includes such items as increasing vehicle registration tax and depreciation schedule, now the half-cent metro sales tax, increasing the electric vehicle fee, which I feel still is in there, I believe. And I notice at least one or two business groups oppose a lot of items that are still in the bill. My question is, do these businesses not rely on goods and products being delivered to them? If a truck must avoid bridge and road restrictions, especially in rural areas, doesn't that cost businesses more and lead to delays in getting products? I think we know the answer. Regardless of the mix of existing revenue increases and new revenue, we would ask you to act in 2023. The Minnesota AFL-CIO respectfully requests you to support new long-term dedicated funding this session. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Leto. Katie Nicholson.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. My name is Katie Nicholson, and I am a resident here in St. Paul. I come to you in support of SF 3157, in support of a metro-wide sales tax. I am going to express my disappointment in the reduction of said sales tax. I'm glad we still have it, but I am going to express my disappointment of it being lowered and the removal of the 75-cent fee on deliveries. That being said, though, I'm still supportive of a metro-wide sales tax. I'm just disappointed that we won't see as much funding for particularly our trunk highways and county state aid highways that are starting to fall into disrepair, and we may eventually need to find another source of funding in the future. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. That being said, this metro-wide sales tax is still going to be beneficial. We are still going to see funding for those said trunk highways and county state aid highways, particularly with the opening of the Metro F line. MnDOT is looking to reconstruct Central Trunk Highway 65 and University Trunk Highway 47 in the Northeast Metro. And their construction plans are going to make these roads safer for all users. We are also in need of funds for the planned reconstruction of Highway 13 and Nicollet Avenue in Burnsville, an area in which recently 3 people have been struck on foot, with 2 people losing their lives. I've personally crossed over there from the Orange Line station to the transit center, and it's pretty scary, and a new interchange there is desperately needed. And I'm also excited to see new funds for the county state aid highway program, many of which are local arterials that most people here in the state are using on a day-to-day basis. And because these are city roads, they're not subject totally to a general fund from the city or the state. Most of that is done by the county, and the county could really use more funds for these reconstructions, especially as Rice Street just outside is getting reconstructed, and residents are looking to get Dale Street, not too far away, reconstructed. We are also going to see an increase in funding for passenger rail services, particularly NLX to Duluth and North Star to St. Cloud. And we're still holding out, many Minnesotans are still holding out hope that Zip Rail to Rochester will be brought back onto the table. And if we fund those passenger rail services, we will need less maintenance on our roads, those trunk highways and those county state aid highways. We can't rely on just these one-time grants or random spontaneous moments that we just happen to find extra money. I understand the frustration related to the surplus, but eventually those funds aren't going to be here anymore. We are eventually going to spend those funds. How's that going to help us years and years into the future? There are many ways we can keep our reconstruction costs down by keeping things in-house, hiring, keeping labor in-house versus contractors, hiring on staff that knows all about multimodal transportation, that sort of thing. We can't keep the status quo. And again, as much as I am still in support of a sales tax, I'm disappointed in reduction of the taxes. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nicholson. Peter Organius. Mr. Organius, welcome to the committee. If you'd identify yourself for the record.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Peter Wegenius, Legislative Director with Sierra Club. Those unfamiliar with transportation finance may be tempted to argue that there's no need for ongoing revenue when there's a surplus of one-time general fund dollars. But transportation is funded differently through dedicated streams. For transportation, there is no surplus. Transit specifically is not something you build and then look at. Transit is a system we must build and operate. That means operate by paying drivers. Paying drivers is an ongoing cost and must be funded with ongoing dollars. It's not even legal to pay drivers with bonds. That's why, for bus service, we've hobbled along for decades, cobbling together one-time dollars bit by bit. That's why bus neglect is such a serious problem. The amended bill with the A50 is much less capable of fixing this, because the last time we had a trifecta, when serious funding was provided for education, healthcare, and other needs, we got nothing on transit, so we lost a decade. And the impacts of that lost decade are real on economic competitiveness, public health, and certainly on our climate emissions. Also on equitable access to opportunity for many Minnesotans too young, too old, physically challenged, or economically distressed, for whom driving a car is not an option. The most regressive outcome possible is the status quo. Chair Dibble held a great meeting on Transit Equity Day, held on Rosa Parks' birthday. We talked about discrimination in transportation funding and bus neglect, a nationwide problem from which Minnesota is not immune. With the very clear financial realities, we know what will result from the A50 amendment now in the bill. First, the big projects, Southwest and Bottineau Rail, will probably still move forward. They usually do. Second, a large number of less expensive BRT projects will not move forward. High on the don't build list will be highway BRT projects that extend to outer ring suburbs like Orange Line BRT to Burnsville. We won't be replicating the cost-effective success of Orange Line on other corridors. Not on highways 394 and 169 South, not on 35W North, not on 55, not on 61, not on 36, certainly not on others. To be fiscally responsible, Met Council will continue speeding up existing service on some arterial BRT corridors rather than provide new service to outer ring suburbs, like along those highways I just named from the 2014 study that has been sitting on a shelf for 9 years. There are also arterial BRT projects that will not move forward and frequency that will not be provided system-wide. That lack of frequency will be the most damaging for ridership and emissions. In conclusion, the big rail projects will likely proceed, but with the A50, the cost of those larger projects will now crowd out many smaller ones. So unless something on the scale of the House Omnibus prevails on the Senate floor or in conference, the impacts are very predictable based on past practice and clear financial realities. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Wagenius. We have one person testifying remotely on Zoom, Mr. Darwin Shefferlane. Are you still with us?
Yes, indeed. Good morning, committee members and Madam Chair. My apologies. My video might freeze because I will probably have to switch windows into a Google Docs document to read off my testimony. I'm sorry I couldn't make it in person today, and there is very good reason why, as you will see. My name is Darwin Shefferlane, and I am a Bloomington resident, and I'm going to get straight to the point. I am so sick and tired of these complaints about raising taxes. Every single committee I've testified on this omnibus transportation bill with, I've always heard the same complaints about how the raised taxes would somehow be regressive against Minnesota's most vulnerable. Let me set the record straight. The status quo is what's regressive. Just this month comes 2 years since I was struck by an SUV in a crosswalk. I have suffered from physical disabilities and post-traumatic stress disorder from this. My mother has stage 4 breast cancer and literally had to go back into the emergency room this morning. We are Minnesota's most vulnerable. We often are the ones who are ordering deliveries and paying the price for not being able to have good access. And guess what? We pay high taxes in this state, so we have high quality services, infrastructure, and support so we can live. Minnesota taxes are high, but it also gives us the highest living standards in the country that prevent us from being at the bottom like Alabama or Mississippi. By refusing to fix the potholes, the terrible sidewalks, and the inaccessible, dangerous, and lethal infrastructure in the state, you are complicit in the traffic violence that results in what happens to me and hundreds of Minnesotans every year. Traffic violence, which is growing at insanely high rates, that kills people and leaves countless more suffering long term. This should not be acceptable. Climbing over snowbanks on unplowed and icy sidewalks should not be acceptable. Waiting for buses in the cold with 30 to 120-minute frequencies should not be acceptable. Not being able to walk or access local stores within a mile or two of your house should not be acceptable, but that is the regressive norm we have. If you actually care about disabled and vulnerable Minnesotans, stop virtue signaling to us about this tax raise. We know what we are paying for, and we know this will make a huge difference for our transportation network. from fixing the crumbling streets, bridges, and roads, to giving us an actual multimodal transportation network that doesn't make us prisoners to our cars. My apologies, Madam Chair, you don't want this mentioned, but the delivery tax has already made it through the House version of this bill to the General Register, so it is worth keeping in the Senate version, and you will be seeing us showing up to support it, and this will be a point of conversation again. I also think there should be a vehicle weight tax considered on this bill to supplant declining gas tax revenue, and as we switch to electric vehicles, which will put more weight on our infrastructure. Car dependency is killing us. Car dependency is bankrupting us. We will gladly pay the dang taxes if it means we don't have to pay with our vehicles getting damaged by potholes, our health and bodies getting damaged by vehicles, and our lives being taken from us. If you actually want Minnesota to reach Vision Zero, I urge this committee and as senators to hear these concerns and support what very well is the best transportation bill in the United States. Thank you for letting me testify today.
Thank you, Mr. Schaeferlin.
Oh, by the way, I should clarify my pronouns are she, her.
I'm sorry. I apologize. That is the end of our testimony. Are there further comments from members of the committee? And there will be a roll call on the vote. Any other comments? Senator Weber.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of things. And I, to Senator Dibble, I appreciate the removal of some of the items and the changes you made in anticipation of today. And I do want to comment, however, as we look at the bill, whether it's the 0.375% increase in sales tax on vehicles, a couple of points regarding that, Madam Chair. In your first bill presentation today, Senator Dibble mentioned about the increasing unaffordability of vehicles for the disadvantaged, and I agree with that statement. And yet here we are with this bill increasing that economic disadvantage by raising the sales tax if they need to replace their vehicle, by raising the tab fees, by raising all the costs primarily of owning that vehicle or acquiring that vehicle. I look at what happens being a border district with the governor's California car rules and now an additional sales tax. When I go through the lots of my car dealers, I see a number of South Dakota and Iowa license plates because people come across the line to buy vehicles. And now, quite frankly, we can make it increasingly non-competitive for our dealers to market to out-of-state customers. You know, I understand the dilemma that Senator Dibble is in, and you are required to build new roads, to repair, to replace, with the increasing costs and all the products that are necessary. And yet I look at here within this bill with the huge incentives we're trying to create to switch people over to electric vehicles who will contribute nothing from a gas tax standpoint to our road system. Where's the increases on them in additional increases to help make up that difference? I don't really see that obviously present in this bill. And so with that being said, I just think it's important for us to recognize that. And also, as we look at the metro sales tax, I don't live up here. It probably shouldn't be any of my concern, although I'm up here for obviously a number of months every year. But, you know, if we look at the combined rates just in Minneapolis and St. Paul, Minneapolis with this 0.5% will be 8.525% sales tax with the state sales tax and all the local options. St. Paul will have 8.375%. You know, that's on every product that families and senior citizens have to buy, except for food items, you know, to live and to get by. And yet we continue to raise their cost of living by that. I understand what it's being used for, and it's up to the local communities to make that decision if they wish to implement that. But, you know, it just seems sometimes that we use you know, the cost to certain segments of our population as a reason to do one thing, but we tend to ignore it when we want to do something else. And quite frankly, Madam Chair, that's the end of my comments.
Thank you very much, Senator Weber. Anyone else wish to speak to the bill? Senator Dibble, I want to thank you so very, very much for the presentation of this bill today. I learned a lot. I continue to learn a lot from you, and certainly have a much better understanding of the goals and the needs for the revenue that are here. I want to personally thank you for responding to my concerns about the level of the sales tax and reducing it to a half a cent. That and removing the delivery fee certainly leads me to enthusiastically support your bill. Before that, there was some hesitancy, I might add, but with those particular removals from the bill, I am enthusiastically a supporter. Anyone else wish to speak? We have a request for a roll call. The Senator Putnam, Senator Dibble, do you want to move the bill, or do you wish Senator Putnam to?
Madam Chair, I'm happy to move the bill.
Senator Dibble moves that Senate File 3157 as amended be recommended to pass and referred to the Committee on Finance. The clerk will take the roll. And I would point out before we begin that Senator Dietzick has been present at this committee meeting remotely. I'm not sure she's still there. There she is, okay. And she will be participating in the roll call. Senator, if you would take the roll, please.
Senator Rust.
Yes.
Senator Klein.
Yes.
Senator Weber.
No.
Senator Dibble.
Yes.
Senator Drazkowski.
No.
Senator Dietzick.
Yes.
Senator Hauschild.
Yes.
Senator Miller.
No.
Senator Nelson. No. Senator Putnam.
Yes.
There being 6 ayes and 4 noes, the motion prevails, and the Senate File 3157 is passed and will be referred to the Committee on Finance. There being...
Thank you, Madam Chair, members.
Senator Dibble.
Sorry. So thank you, Madam Chair and members.
Sure. There being no further business before the committee, we're adjourned.